मुसाफिर मैं हूँ यारो ना घर है ना ठिकाना. Welcome guys, and okay, so that was an interruption, so I'm making another video on this. So we have Azure Cloud Shell. So from Azure Cloud Shell we're going to interact with our cluster. So for this we'll go ahead and create a storage. What we can do is like we can choose this particular setting, and I'll just choose my pay-as-you-go, and then I'll mention the resource group as I'll just provision my this gonna be common to, and it need to be consistent across all the time. So what I would prefer is to put this particular Cloud Shell in a different resource group, so that I do not go ahead and delete it accidentally. So I'll choose a new resource group, and I would create a new storage account. If you have certain already, you would not require, and I would put my the storage account in southern part of India, and then I'll go create. Okay, it says it cannot. Okay, it's not allowing, so let's go. It didn't allow me to create there. Let me quickly create Cloudshell STGRG, and then let it be Central India. I'll just Cloudshell. Okay, just a STG. And this is storage account, and we'll have file share for keeping your files, and make it as file share. Okay, let's create it. Create storage. It would spin the storage account where actually you can keep your files, and then from there you can edit on the fly. And then we'll be talking about something called as an add-on called as Monaco, so which is good, easy to integrate. You do not need to have you need to know about the commands of Vim commands for this, so you can directly edit as you do on Windows. Okay, so which we were talking about on this particular thing. This is Monaco. You can see after your Cloud Shell loads up, you can enable this. Yes, it's in preview, but you can enable this. I'll let you know once we go into that particular portion as well. And then so it says account name invalid. Okay, no problem. Let's see. Okay, go ahead. Okay, it says about this name. If you have some caps, it would not allow. So I'll make, and then I'll make this as file share. Great. So it did not allow the other characters, so it did not create at that time. But yes, so once it creates, we should be able to see. Yep, boom. So our Cloud Shell is loaded, and you can see this. That's a storage file share, and it had loaded up our subscription ID. It would initialize for your first time, and even whenever you open a shell, it would create a new session with that particular remote machine where the Cloud Shell is going to operate. Basically, it's a service like which would be used. Yes, so once the cluster comes, we can use a lot of this. So one major thing which I want to talk about, let's go to the resource group. Okay, so if you go to the resource group, how many resource groups it actually created? So it created 3 resource groups. This is one resource group which we have which we created, and where the cluster is provisioning, but it keeps its secondary resources under something called as MC underscore your resource group name underscore your cluster name underscore your location name. So that's sort of, you know, a drill down isolation you can just get from the naming standard which Azure is following in AKS. So that's real good. And you can see there are resources, and these resources are my external. This is a load balancer. It's an external load balancer. You can go in and check, and we have the VNet where we have the nodes which are provisioned. Since we have chosen VM scale set, so we have the VM scale sets, and we have chosen the nodes or the instances as 2. So we have each agent pool will have one particular node running into it. Okay, so we have different pools we can create with VMSs, and yes, we can always, you know, welcome to come and scale this particular instance count, and even you do not need to bother, because if you have your applications which are already installed on your 2 of these instances, so when you scale up, it would take care of, you know, spinning up the pods, the ingresses, everything on the new nodes or new agent nodes. So that's real good, and you can achieve this by the JSON as well. You can remote trigger the auto scaling as well, and these are the route table, like where the traffic need to go. And yes, the main thing, you know, which we're going to discuss is like if you go to the subnets, okay, so how much IP address ranges these many available addresses are there for, you know, provisioning our nodes. Okay, so and then we have NSGs and the public IP. So basically what happens, you cannot skip the public IPs which it's getting generated by the first API first cluster AKS cluster creation, but you can block the public IP creation, because most of the enterprise wouldn't allow, you know, to have public IP directly. Instead of, you know, routing your traffic from some secure resources like app gateway and other external load balance services, other services are there which you should use, but here it spins upon external load balancer and a public IP address. Okay, so it's always recommended to go ahead and delete these particular public IP addresses. And as of now, if you want to block it, if you're creating a cluster the manual way, there's no way to block it. But if you're using a CLI way, which we're gonna go through in our next videos in V3, and V3 video 3 series, or the parts where we will know, like, you know, how we're gonna block by using a concept called as user defined routes, or UDR. Okay, and if you use UDR, you can actually, you know, block the AKS cluster from creating a public IP. So this is the first resource group which it creates, where the cluster is created, and it's all dependency nodes are created in different resource group. Remember always, if you want to search with MC_resource group, your cluster name and the region name. And there is something called as, you know, like when you enable log analytics, so it would create its separate container insights resource group, which is called a default resource group dash with CIN. Okay, so you can see the log analytics workspace which would be created, and it would connect, and probably let's see if it's able to fetch the data which we want to see right away. So you can see, just get started. You should see your container insights. So you can see these are the list of the tables which it gets flourishes in. We'll come on to it. We have a specific videos for this particular thing. Let's go back to our cluster. So the first and foremost command which I would love to, okay, before that, let's see. Okay, so in order to you know, if you don't know how to connect to the cluster, so for a non-RBAC cluster, you always see this particular Kubernetes dashboard. Okay, but for the RBAC cluster, you will not see, because RBAC will have an isolation from the from the cluster onwards. So you need to create role bindings explicitly to give access to a certain customer to access dashboard. So that's why you cannot see this particular portion of a UI portal in an RBAC cluster. Yes, so if you want to you know, communicate with the cluster, you always, you know, you can go and install the CLI. If you do not have already have the kubectl installed, you can go ahead and do this. And for this, I can go and run my PowerShell, and I can So AZ is not installed, so you can also install AZ. So like you can browse and you can install AZ. But yes, so if you don't want to have machine specific issues, so it's always best to go with Cloudshell and use Cloudshell. So what I would do is, like, I will now get credentials to log into my cluster. Okay. And one more the good thing, or what you can say is, good standards to follow. If you have multiple clusters, multiple subscriptions, it's always suggested to run this particular AZ account set command with the subscription name, and my subscription name is this. So if you have spaces in between, you are always open to block it with quotes and then run it. Okay, so it would set the Azure account, the subscription for you, and then you are ready to go and execute your get the credentials. So what it does is, like, it goes and it would get a kubeconfig file for you, which means a context file, and if you want to access this particular thing from outside, or if you want to give access to someone, you can just give this kubeconfig file to them, and they can access to this particular cluster. So one thing is, so if you use Monaco, you can just use code dot and bang, it just opens all your files in here. And if you go to your cloud drive, your cloud console, you have a lot of files. And if you go to kube, and this is your kube config, that's what I'm talking about. So your user can connect, or your developers can connect, but you can limit that, like, here I've logged in as a normal cluster. So this particular kube config which has been generated, it can be given to your particular developers, or the user developers, or but for admins, you always generate something called as you tag with admin. Okay, since I'm the creator of this particular one, so I'm able to connect to it. And since it says, like, it has created AKS cluster, this one, and it had created AKS cluster admin, and if you see, the current context is AKS cluster, it's not AKS cluster admin. So let's refresh and see whether it had overwritten the kubeconfig file or not. Okay, so if it not refreshes, then you are always open to run the code dot, yeah, bang, you can see that now we have the another context in this particular kubeconfig file. It's AKS cluster admin. Okay, so with AKS cluster role context, AKS cluster context, and it also has a AKS cluster admin context. So this all thing also depends upon what sort of context you are setting up, and we have role bindings and other stuff which would come up in future, and it would give the client secret key, everything to, and the token to access remotely as well. You do not need a cloud shell if you have the kubeconfig file. You can just go with this after installing AZ, and you can connect with the kubeconfig file. So this is the one thing where you're able to. And what I can do with here is I can actually I can create any file in the Monaco. This is a particular UI which I was talking about, where I can go and edit my files. I can write anything and I can edit. And if I'm editing, you can see this particular dot, and I can go and save this. Okay, that's a good feature which actually I've I came to know once I started working with this. So you can close the editor with that particular key, and then now what we're gonna do is we're gonna minimize it, and we will go and browse our Kubernetes dashboard. So this is a default dashboard which is visible, and for which you do not need to configure a lot in a non-RBAC cluster. So you can see that, right? I was able to go and I just ran AZ got the credentials, but it did not authenticate whether the user is a proper RBAC user or not before running any kubectl commands or something like that. So you can see you have this particular kubeconfig file. It says you have the token, and you can give the token, you remember you have something called as code dot. So you can it's always recommended to exit out of the dashboard if you are going out of the context of you do not need to use dashboard. So but because I need to go into the context and run the code dot, and I want to see the file from which I can get the token. So I'll just Control C, I'll close it, because if you don't do that, then the port where it's occupying, that port would be still busy and you can't the more dashboards. Okay, so I'll go and I'll click the code dot, and now I'll get the token. I'll get the admin token. Yes, let's go here and copy the admin token, and or it's best, let's go here and open my Notepad++, and because I don't want to come again and again, right? So I'll just go and open my dashboard. So you can open your dashboard with admin cluster or the normal cluster context, and I'll go here, I'll just have my token. I'll just go and get the normal user token. Okay, I do not want to take other user, so this is user and my token is this. I'll go and then sign in, bang, and you landed onto your Kubernetes. This is a first dashboard, and you can see there are a lot of components in here which you did not roll out. So these are the 4 namespaces which it creates. This is a default, and this is a kube node lease with respect to the nodes and other particular contexts, and this is kube public, where it can be used by anyone, and the kube system. Thing is, you can provision your particular resource on any of this, but it's always suggested to create your own namespace. Okay, and you can create namespace with like here you can select namespace 1. Okay, and it goes and it creates a namespace for you, and you do not have any resource in it, and you can deploy your containerized apps. And yes, I'll go as of now with the default, and I would love to see what are the services and other things which are running underneath it. So if you come here, you see very basic things like the cluster. So it says something about the cluster roles. Okay, so these are the rules which I've created, because what happens, the rules are required because we are enabling OMS agent to write logs onto the log analytics. Okay, so since we create a log analytics workspaces, it does run this particular agent, but the agent need to be tagged with a role. So that is this is that particular cluster roles. And rules are sort of rules which we use in AD and other stuff, right? Like it's similar, like it mentions what particular resource I need to access, and it also says there's the rules has a concept of rules. The rule says like what a particular role can do. Okay, so they are defined by verbs. Verbs are list, get, watch, like, which means that he can get the list of these particular resources, pods, events like this, or he can get them, he can watch them. Okay, since we logged in with a normal context usage, so they do not have much permissions on the namespace level. Okay, and so these are the things which we will be going through, and the API groups are allowed is star. So all of the API resource groups are allowed here. So this is one thing. There's a cluster roles and namespaces we discussed. The namespaces are the logical grouping, and we have these namespaces which we are able to select here as well. And if you go here, the nodes are we are running 2 nodes which you have seen running in here. So we had the nodes. So as I said, we have how we find a node is